So the data structure is important because React applications and components are simplest when they're data-driven. So what does that mean? Let's take a look at this component as an example. So this component takes a single post and renders it to the browser, and that post might look something like this. But the thing we have to keep in mind is that this is really only one representation that this view might take, and it represents the static, sort of not in transition representation. But in a more fleshed out application, we might need a different component to show that the post is being loaded, or we might need to render a faded post to show that it's being updated, or if a post had an error when we attempted to update it, we might want to visualize that somehow to let the user know that something went wrong. And so all of these are different ways to render a post. And so to truly make our component data-driven, it's important that the data it receives is descriptive enough in order for it to know how to render that resource properly. In other words, we not only need the data attributes for that resource, but we also need the context surrounding it. To help with this problem, every model that Lore provides to a component has a data structure around it that looks like this. And this structure was specifically designed to enable data-driven behavior for key use cases, and it currently has 5 fields. The ID field is the unique ID for the resource and is set by the API server after resource creation. This field is required for CRUD operations like updating and deleting resources and is frequently used to fetch a resource based on information in the route's URL. The CID field stands for Client ID and is a unique client-side ID created by the framework itself. It is unique within the lifecycle of the application in the browser. This field is especially helpful for use cases like optimistic updates, as well as enabling blocking experiences, such as those you might see in a multi-part creation wizard. Experiences where you need to wait for server confirmation that a resource was created before moving to the next step. The state field is a descriptive label that declares what's happening to the data at any point in time. This not only includes verbs like creating and updating, but also error conditions when the server requests fail, and this field is especially useful when components need to change what they render based on the activity in the application. Basically, the use case we just talked about for data-driven components. The data field contains all attributes that describe that resource and will often mirror the data retrieved from the API server. And finally, the error field contains any information provided by the server when a request fails and returns a 400 or 500 level status code. So that covers the model data structure. Let's change our component to request a collection instead of a model and look at that data structure. So collections follow a similar pattern, though they have fewer fields, currently being state, data, and error. Just like model, the state field is a descriptive label that declares what's happening to the data at any point in time, though for collections, this will typically only communicate whether or not that collection is currently being fetched. The data field will be an array containing the models within that collection, and those models will be wrapped in the model data structure we just talked about. And finally, we have the error field again, which will also contain any information provided by the server when a request fails and returns a 400 or 500 level status code. So reviewing what we just covered, the data structure you select is important because data-driven components make for simpler React applications. The core challenge is providing context to the data that components receive, and the approach that Lore takes is wrapping data in a declarative data structure.